saved some money, and you want what you've saved to be worth something 10 or 20 years down the line, which if you really want to save it, you've got to put it into something other than national currencies, because national currencies all around the world are constantly losing their value by the minute, especially here in the United States right now. Today, a dollar, because of this Federal Reserve game, a dollar will buy what in 1913, when the Federal Reserve System was created, it would cost 3 cents. So, a 3 cent package of gum in those days, I guess today, costs $1. The same gum. So what happened? Did the gum get more expensive? Not really. It's just that the dollar became more worthless. The thing that held its value was the gum. But the dollar lost its value, and that's the trick of inflation, of course. So if you're saving, you work very hard, and you put, say, 5 or 10% of your savings aside every week or every month, and you say, boy, this is what I need when I want to retire, or when I want to quit working someday and travel around the world, or whatever you want to do with it, and you put that money aside. You don't want to put it somewhere where it's losing its value at that rate, because by the time you do retire, it'll be worth 3 cents again. So, if you want to protect the worth of what you've saved, you've got to put it into something other than national currencies. And I can't think of anything better than gold or silver.
The thing is, though, that there is this argument that sounds reasonable, that there's not enough quantity of gold and silver to transact inside of. So what do you propose in terms of how we function?
Well, to me, that does not sound reasonable, because I think anybody that says that does not realize that the value of gold, one of the values of gold, is that it is limited in supply. I mean, if you keep expanding the supply of gold, then it becomes, you're doing the same thing as with expanding the supply of paper money. The value of gold is that it is limited. And the more limited something is, the more valuable it is, and especially in terms of money. You could base a monetary system on copper, or nickel, or silver, or gold, or platinum, or palladium, and it would work just as well with any of them, except that if you use one of the more common metals like copper, it would take a huge amount of it to have any value. And so you want something in the middle that is limited, but not that limited.
I totally get what you're saying, but do you think there's enough to transact in?
Oh, absolutely.
If you could do a revamp right now, we know you'd end the Fed. I get that. And there's other types of major reform that you would do. But in terms of instituting a metals transaction universe, what would you do?
I would get the government out of it. That's all you have to do, and let the free market take over. The free market is super intelligent. It's the free interaction of tens of millions of people around the world doing what they think is best for them, and that will automatically adjust. And let me apply that to the issue of there's not enough gold, as they say. That is absolutely untrue. There is more gold on this planet than you can possibly imagine. 99.99999% of it is still in the ground and in the oceans. It's just a question of how hard do you want to work to get it out. And as the demand for gold goes up, and you can buy more and more with it, like it's happening now, why, all of a sudden it becomes more interesting to work pretty hard to get it out of the ground. And so the supply starts to expand. I can speak from experience on that, because a few years ago I got intrigued by a little gold mine up in Montana, and I decided to invest in it. And I went up there, and I was poking around, listening to some of the people, the local people, and the message I got was, these mines have been sitting around here pretty much useless for 20 or 30 years because the price of gold had been pushed down. But now that the price of gold is going up, why, there are miners all over these hills, and they're digging it out and so forth. This is how it works, you see. When the price of gold goes up, the miners go into the field and start digging it out. The quantity expands, and the price comes back down again, because, it's supply and demand. It's a very simple law. They don't teach it anymore in schools, but it's a simple law.
But what do you think about the people in the commodities markets that say that the commodities markets are constantly being manipulated? They're shorting markets and shorting different types of food products and shorting stocks and ETFs and shorting the actual metals themselves.
Yeah. They could not do any of that without government protection. That's the bottom line.
Okay.
They get away with that because they're protected by the government. And in various ways. That whole market, that whole
commodities future
market
exchange
is supposedly regulated. There's that word again. And people think it's regulated for the protection of the consumer, and that's not true. It's regulated so that these speculators can pull that game off, you see. Yeah, it's true. There is a lot of manipulation, but even that cannot go on forever. Right now, for example, the world's supply of silver has been going down, down, down every month. I've been watching it for years, and it's now almost to the point where the demand for the use of silver is, of course, bigger than the production of silver.
Right, the above-the-ground supply, correct?
Above-the-ground supply. And that reserve has been dwindling, so now I don't know what it is, but it's almost invisible. So that means they can't play that game much longer. The free market, or as they say, the gods of the copybook headings, always return. And when that happens, the game is over for the speculators, and so they go out of business. That's what's happening with some of these banks. They're being called upon to deliver on their false promises, and they can't, and so they go to government, and they say, hey, bail us out. We're going to go bankrupt. You don't want us to go bankrupt, do you? That's bad for America. And so the Congress steps in and says, yeah, we'll vote you another $100 billion. So the taxpayers cough it up, you see. That's the game. If the government would just stay out of it and let these bullion banks who are cheating, let them fail, then the market would take over and everything would be fine. But right now, the crooks are protected by government. And that's the whole message I'm trying to deliver here. The free market will take care of it. But right now, there's nobody in Washington that's the least bit interested in a free market. Because under those conditions, they don't have control over people or over industry. And they don't make profits. So that's the game. And there's one more thing. I'm glad you brought this up because some people argue that, well, who would want to base a money system on gold? Because, the bankers own it all, and it's just playing right into their hands. They've got all the gold. Well, that's not true. They don't have but a small percentage of it, but it's even more than that. The bankers want to own the gold as much as they can for the same reason that I want to own gold as much as I can, because it's a means of protecting the value of whatever money I have, and it's smart. But that doesn't mean they want to base a money system on gold. There's a difference between holding gold as a means of preserving your wealth and basing a money system on gold.
Right.
Banks make money when they loan money because they collect interest on this thing. Okay, so if you limit the amount of money that banks can loan, then you're limiting the amount of interest that they can charge, and you're limiting their profits. So if the only money they can loan is what already exists in the form of gold or silver in their vaults, boy, are they cut off a lot. They can't just create millions or billions or trillions of dollars like they're doing now and loaning it to the government and collecting interest on it because they don't have it.
Do you think that in our modern world, credit is a good thing or a bad thing at this point? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear you.
Well, I think credit is a good thing.
Okay.
If it's based on a free market principle. Credit is nothing wrong with credit, but it's when what we have now is they call it credit, but it's not. It's not credit at all. It's what is it?
It's uncollateralized credit.
Uncollateralized credit, and even that is okay up to very small amounts of prudent amount, but it's counterfeit. That's what it is. It's not credit. It's counterfeit. That's the word I'm looking for. They're actually creating this money. They're not lending money based on credit. They're creating it out of nothing.
Right, and they're adding to the money supply.
Exactly.
And I understand if the M3 of the money supply is severely expanded, this will cause inflation.
Yes, that's true.
You say that inflation is a hidden tax. Why?
Well, Yeah, when the money supply expands at a rate faster than the expansion of goods and services, now you have this disparity, and it's the old issue of supply and demand kicks in, and if the supply of money just